Hello everyone, this is Venus Brown. I am going to be doing my first reaction and discussion of the season 1 premiere of House of the Dragon. I got a new phone and I wanted to try it out. For most of this recording, I do plan on using the audio from the phone and the visual from my original recording. The issue will be lining everything up, and that may be a little difficult, but I'll do what I can to try to get them lined up. Let's get to the reaction of House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 1.
The Prince Viserys,
Rhaenys, a woman, would not inherit the Iron Throne. The Lords instead chose Viserys, my father. Jaehaerys called the Great Council to prevent a war being fought over his succession. For he knew the cold truth. The only thing that could tear down the House of the Dragon was itself.
hard lads. High up.
I forgot about the whole language part. You know, hopefully we'll get some of the Game of Thrones nerds who might remember how some of the language goes, because I don't.
You're worried your father is about to overshadow you with a son. I only worry for my mother. I hope for my father that he gets a son. As long as I can recall, it's all he's wanted. You want him to have a son? I want to fly with you on Dragonback, see the great wonders across the narrow sea and eat only cakes.
After this miserable pregnancy, I wouldn't be surprised if I hatched an actual dragon.
And he will be loved, Cherry.
Rhaenyra has already declared that she's to have a sister.
Really?
She even named her
Dare I ask?
Viserys. She chose the dragon's egg for the cradle that she said reminded her of Vhagar.
God be good. His family already has it to Viserys.
But your family recycles names all the time.
Brother?
Not since I named him commander of the City Watch. I'm sure he will re-emerge for the tourney. He can never stay away from the lists.
The tourney. To celebrate the firstborn son that we presently do not have. You do understand. Cause the babe to grow a cock if it does not already possess one.
This child is a boy, Emma.
Yeah.
I'm certain of it. I've never been more certain of anything.
I think it's a child. That's
Katrine,
how kids work.
it was clearer than a memory. Our son was born wearing Aegon's iron crown. And I heard the sound of thundering hooves, splintering shields and ringing swords. And I placed our son upon the Iron Throne. As the bells of the Grand Set tolled,
Idea.
and all the dragons roared as one.
Why would you put an infant on a chair made of swords?
Born wearing a crown. God spare me. Birth is unpleasant enough as it is.
Yeah, give birth to a baby wearing a crown.
I gotta get to know more of this Prince Daemon because I already have this preconceived idea about him from the books. And he's sounding a little bit different than what people are saying.
It's not like they're giving them a trial or anything.
Trial, like, just randomly beating everyone up. We found you. Bam. You're guilty, we know it.
Existing.
You're alive and on the wall.
I was in my building. They threw me out of it. Ran out of the house.
What do you know about this Sir Crispin Cole, Sam?
I'm told Sir Crispin is common-born son of Lord Dondarrion's steward, but other than that, and the fact that he's just unhorsed both of the Baratheon lads, I really couldn't say.
Is he in that Viking show that we watched?
Of the city will now choose his first opponent. For his first challenge, Prince Daemon Targaryen chooses Sir Gawain Hightower of Old Town, eldest son of the Hand of the King.
Looks like the horse got back up. I didn't look so hot.
Nicely done, Uncle.
Thank you, Princess. Now, I'm fairly certain I can win these games, Lady Alicent. Having your favour would all but assure it.
He does not look
Good
pleased.
luck, Sir Prince.
I do always wish they would ask the women, but it doesn't always happen.
No, it's all right.
What is happening?
No, it's all right. It's all right. They're going to bring the baby back. It's all right.
Please.
It's all right.
No, I'm scared of nothing.
Don't be scared. Don't be scared. They're going to bring the baby back. It's all right. They're going to bring the baby back.
I'm making the first incision. Please don't
Don't be scared.
Alien pod sack is getting burned.
Gracious loser. I suspect him to just turn around and hit him anyway.
Like, aha, I have another dagger in your throat.
Gods, he's Dornish.
I was hoping to ask for the princess's favour.
Wish you luck, Sir Kristen.
Princess?
I will not be made to choose between my brother and my daughter.
You wouldn't have to, Your Grace. There are others who would have a claim.
Such as your wife, Lord Corlys, or the Queen who never was.
Rhaenys was the only child of Jaehaerys' eldest son. She had a strong claim at the Great Council, and she already has a male
Just
heir.
moments ago, you announced your support for Daemon.
If we cannot agree on an heir, then how can we
My
expect
wife
a
and
ransom?
son are dead! I will not sit here and suffer crows that come to feast on their corpses!
Seriously, did you think that would go well?
Offer him comfort.
In his chambers. I wouldn't know what to say.
It's not bad. He'll be glad of a visitor.
You might wear one of your mother's dresses.
Nothing like sending a 12-year-old in there. Jesus.
Last night, Prince Damon bought out one of the pleasure houses on the Street of Silk to entertain officers of the City Watch and other friends of his.
King and Council have long ruled my position as next in line for the throne. But, dream and pray as they all might, it seems I'm not so easily replaced. The gods give just as the gods take away.
He toasted Prince Balon,
the king's son,
styling him the heir for a day. It's important. What do you see?
I suppose I see us.
Tell me.
Everyone says Targaryens are closer to gods than to men. But they say that because of our dragons. Without them, we're just like everyone else.
The idea that we control the dragons is an illusion. They are a power man should never have trifled with.
One that brought Valyria its doom. If we don't mind our own histories, it would do the same to us. Targaryen must understand this to be king. Or queen.
Daemon was not made to wear the crown, but I believe that you are.
Corlys of House Velaryon, Lord of the Tides, and Master of Driftmark.
I, Corlys Velaryon, Lord of the Tides and Master of Driftmark.
What is it?
Rhaenyra Targaryen, Princess of Dragonstone.
It's making me all emotional.
To the Iron Throne.
Lots of good stuff. Lots of stuff for me to look up. Watching the labor and delivery was hard. But, you know, I mean, we like to romanticize natural childbirth and everything, but labor is a very difficult thing, and especially when things don't go right. And it can be deadly. And in that situation, yeah, she died because of blood loss, but the reality is she could have died anyway. So I think the main point of the episode was really to establish this these challenges with who will be the heir, which is a main plot throughout a lot of the Targaryen family, who's going to be the next heir to the throne. And you have Daemon, who kind of just assumes that he is the next heir, that he's the heir to the throne. Was Daemon, I believe, is Viserys' brother. So he's a male. He's his brother. He does not yet have a male heir, and so Daemon is just assuming I'm the next heir. And I'll talk a little bit about Daemon's issues later, why that might not be the best thing. Then you have Viserys, who's wanted a son throughout his marriage, and for various reasons that hasn't happened. He's got a daughter. His wife Emma has had multiple miscarriages and a couple babies that died in the crib, and has not been able to sustain a living heir. And this episode does show the birth of a son, Balon, I believe, but he only lives for a day. So he doesn't get the heir that he's hoping for. And that also presents this issue with Rhaenyra, who I think she feels overshadowed because her father has wanted this son basically her entire life. He has made her his cupbearer and everything. He has kept her close by his side, but he has not raised her as an heir to the throne. He has not raised her with any idea that she might possibly become the heir to the throne. And that makes, I think that makes her feel maybe a little ignored. I think we see this in a lot of shows, especially period pieces, where this is the reality. The lords and ladies and all the royalty that are in place, whether it's a fictional piece or a non-fictional piece, are in certain positions which we may not experience today currently for the most part, but in their time or in their place, that was the reality. The males are leadership positions. The females tend not to be. We do have queens that existed, but there is this real emphasis throughout history and in this fictional history that males should rule over the kingdom and females should take some kind of side or back seat. Anybody who's watched Game of Thrones, we know that there's always these issues with family members, especially for Game of Thrones. In the Lannister family, you had like certain family members that were always a challenge for certain people, that always seemed to cause issues for the family and for the way the family appears to the people in the kingdom. And in this one, we get to see just a little bit of that with Daemon and the issues that Daemon's behaviors and character present for the idea that he could be king. And I'm going to do another presentation, not right now, maybe in a week or so, that will kind of cover a little bit of the history and family up to this point from Fire and Blood, just to kind of catch us up. So the beginning of the show, they did present some of the reality that had occurred when it comes to the secession of Viserys. We do see a little bit of the issues which are talked about in Fire and Blood being presented here in House of the Dragon. I think it's presented a little bit different, where Daemon has these flaws. Daemon, I think, is a bit chaotic. Daemon can be irresponsible, but Daemon is also very brave, and Daemon fights very well. So there are certain characteristics that would be very good for a king, yet there are other characteristics that makes him, I'll just say, less than dependable and worrisome that he could become a tyrant. And we see some of that in his actions when he basically commands the King's Guard, the gold cloaks, which he is the one that created the gold cloaks, apparently. So you see that when he basically commands the gold cloaks to summarily judge criminals within their walls and summarily execute punishments upon them without trial or anything. Viserys defended his brother repeatedly for some of the things that he did, but at this point in the show, we're seeing a point in their history where Daemon has committed these serious offenses, and then that the people on the board or the council do not like, and then he goes and does something that the king sees as really egregious. He's in a state where he's really grieving, and he hears this news. He knows the kind of person that his brother is, but this is just such an insult. And at a point after their deaths, that the king is very, very upset, and so this becomes like the straw that breaks the camel's back, and that's it. King's had enough, and he's done with Daemon. And we do see a little bit of him talking to Rhaenyra, I think, trying to weigh the reality of the situation, that he knows that he has these two possible heirs, and that at this point he's so pissed off with his brother, and he's so done with his brother being this awful, chaotic, challenging person in his family, where the dragons burn the bodies of Viserys' wife and child. We do see that Daemon is actually trying to plead with Rhaenyra to kind of like do what she needs to do as a family. Like you have these certain family duties, these responsibilities, and your family has these situations where they need the support of their family, and he does seem to recognize that this is a time that Viserys is going to need your support. He's going to need it more than ever. And so he at least has that. It's just that, you know, they show him later in the bar just joking around lightly about his brother's baby dying. We are also introduced in the show to a couple of the dragons. The yellow dragon, which is Rhaenyra's dragon, called Syrax. And then we are also introduced to the red dragon, which is Daemon's dragon, called Caraxes. And it's just, the dragons are amazing. So cool. And this is one of the things that I think most of my family is really excited about, is all the dragons, that we get to see so many dragons. And HBO always does a really good job at presenting these dragons as these just very awesome, powerful, amazing creatures. At the very beginning, Rhaenyra comes in with her guard, and I was like, I immediately recognized him, and like often occurs with me, I recognized him, but I wasn't sure where I recognized him from, and I was like, who is that guy? So on the show, her guard is Sir Harold Westerling, and where I recognized him from was episodes of Outlander. At first I thought maybe I had seen him in Vikings, but where I actually saw him was in Outlander, and we've also seen him in other shows like The Hobbit. I just wouldn't have remembered that because it was so long ago since I've seen The Hobbit, and my memory is not that great when it comes to remembering names and faces. Like, I usually remember the faces, but not necessarily the names, and if it was a long time ago, it's much harder for me to retain that stuff. We're also introduced to Alicent Hightower, who is Rhaenyra's good friend at the time, and we're introduced to her father, the Hand of the King, Otto Hightower. We're introduced to Rhaenys Velaryon and Corlys Velaryon. And these are... so Rhaenys was Targaryen and married to Corlys Velaryon. They call him the Sea Snake in Fire and Blood. He is one of the only other families that actually came from Valyria, from old Valyria. So the Targaryens and the Velaryons came from Valyria, and the Targaryens kind of rule the skies with the dragons, and the Velaryons rule the seas with their ships. I think the dresses that we've been shown on the show are so amazing and so pretty, so pretty. I loved Alicent's dress and Rhaenyra's dress and Rhaenys' dresses, all of them. They were so pretty. We were also introduced to Queen Emma, and of course King Viserys. And Queen Emma is in the show getting ready to have her baby, and she does discuss the challenges of her having multiple losses because of children dying at birth or soon after birth, and having miscarriages. And she tells Viserys that this is like, really, she can't handle any more of this. After this one, that's it, because she can't handle another mourning yet another lost child. Of course, with Daemon, we're also introduced to Mysaria, which is, I want to say a Lysini prostitute that he has a serious relationship. I'm sure we'll see more of her later on, because she is a major part of his relationship. And they do bring up he is actually married to somebody in the Vale, but in the books we do, if you have read the books, then we know that he actually requested that Viserys put that marriage aside, and Viserys refused. So he's basically married to this woman. He does not want to be married to her, yet he can't get the marriage put aside, and instead he does what he does. Daemon is known as a player, and he he has sex with lots of people, but Mysaris is one of his main partners, I'll say. And of course we see other people, kind of side characters, at least for now. I think some of them will be more major characters later. Laena, Laenor, they're very young in this show, but I'm sure we'll see much older presentations of them later, which I'm looking forward to. You have the council, what was it, the High Septon. Now I looked up the High Septon, and it's funny because I'm like, which High Septon? But all of them just have him labeled as the High Septon, because there's more than one High Septon. There's one at a time, but they have names, and with each procession, a new High Septon comes in with a different name. So I was like really curious, which High Septon is this? The Valyrian family is a very, very important family at the time in Westeros, and a very important family because they did come from Valyria. So, and the Corlys family, or the Valyrian family, is also very wealthy, mostly due to Corlys Velaryon. Corlys Velaryon has brought a lot of wealth because of his ventures at sea. And that's all I'm going to say about it, just that the Velaryons are a very important family. Corlys Velaryon is an important person in the family. And we do see a little bit of the challenges that have occurred because of Rhaenys being passed over for ruling on the Iron Throne. And there's more to it than that, but we'll talk about that. Let's talk about the reality of delivering a baby in this day and age, or this kind of period, even though it's fictional, where we still, I think, have an understanding. We're talking about, you know, for us it would be like way back when, and you don't have the medical technology, you do not have the medical understanding of how everything works. And they do when Queen Emma begins to have problems with her delivery, with the baby being breech and not being able to get it to turn, they do present this option for C-section. But the reality is they don't have the ability, at least at that time, to cut her open, remove the baby, and stop her blood loss in time to keep her from dying. And now the whole thing with pain, they do have options for pain, but I'm not sure how much they're really willing to go into the kind of damage that giving milk of the poppy and alcohol and stuff like that to a pregnant woman while she's delivering a baby to try to numb some of the pain, the kind of damage that might cause to the baby. We already know that Emma's gonna die for going through a C-section, but we don't get any information about like how they feel about that idea. Like this is going to happen very quickly anyway, so I don't know how much effect drinking a whole bunch of alcohol or a bunch of milk of the poppy is really going to numb things down there that quickly. But yeah, it's just, it was very hard to watch. Now let's also talk a little bit about what happens with the Hand of the King and his daughter Alicent after the king is back home grieving his recently passed wife and son. Because I have a problem with that, but I know this is a Game of Thrones kind of show, and there are going to be things like this which I will personally have a problem with, but are just a normal part of things in that world. But seriously, sending your teenage daughter to a grieving king to comfort him, and we could say, oh, you know, I mean, she goes in there and it seems that she just reads to him and talks to him, gives him the kind of comfort that, yes, he should be getting, that kind of comfort. But it definitely appeared to me that Otto Hightower was sending his daughter to give him a different kind of comfort, which I did not appreciate. We don't know the ages of these girls at the time, but they appear to be teenagers. And while according to the books, King Viserys is not really terribly old, he's still like, I think, twice her age or something like that. And so the idea that you would send your daughter to give him that kind of comfort right after his child and wife's death, to me it's inappropriate, both because his wife and child just died, and that to me is not the kind of processing for grief that he really needs. but also she's a teenager. She is like half his age. And in the show, he looks much older, but I had to remind myself that the Targaryens have white hair, so they might look a lot older than they actually are. So, but yeah, like, you're seriously gonna send your daughter, and he gives her the idea that, oh, maybe you should wear one of your mother's dresses. Like that's really telling me that's what you're talking about, is sending her to give him another kind of comfort that to me is very inappropriate. But I'm sure for some people in that world at that day and time that maybe that was completely normal, but to me that's just so inappropriate. Now, when the council was talking to Viserys right after his wife and son died about the coming heir, and trying to establish a concrete person to be heir to the king, one of the main things that they addressed was this idea that because of tradition and precedent in Westeros, having a girl rule over the Iron Throne wouldn't be a legitimate option. So I want to talk a little bit about that, but not too much, because this is a major issue that I plan on talking about in the other video. That, to me, you have two sets of traditions here. You have the traditions in Westeros, and so having a female queen ruling over the Iron Throne would not be considered acceptable, would be considered inappropriate for the traditions. Then they have this precedent that was set by the council that decided to pass over Rhaenys in order for Viserys to be put in as king. That bugs me, though, because that was one council. There were hundreds of years of people on the Iron Throne before Rhaenys, and that one council made that decision. And just because no female had literally sat on the throne as the ruler of Westeros before that, to me, shouldn't be deemed as a precedent that we can't ever have a female rule over the kingdom. But whatever. So yeah, you've got those two, and the Targaryens have a variety of traditions that are going to be very different from the traditions and customs of Westeros and the precedents in Westeros. And they did eventually manage to handle the idea of brothers and sisters getting marrying within the family, which was looked down upon by the religious people in Westeros. They just don't address the reality that the Targaryens have had this tradition long before they ever came to Westeros. And while we would look upon that as very disgusting, this is the reality for them. This is part of their tradition, part of their culture. That these things that we might look at as very inappropriate, that the Westerosis might look at as very inappropriate, were completely normal for them. Were completely appropriate for them. And the main two that are talked about in this show and in Fire and Blood are the tradition of sibling marriages and sibling offsprings, and the tradition of females also being able to rule over whatever kingdom that they are in authority over. I think I talked a little bit about that reality that she has been brought up that she was not going to be heir to the throne. That was not her role. So her entire life she has been raised that this wasn't her role. Yet in this moment in history, those roles suddenly are changed, and she is put in a position where she was never going to be heir to the throne, and now all of a sudden she is heir to the throne. And she's a teenager. She's a young person who's still trying to figure herself out, who is trying to deal with the complexities and realities of the world she lives in, which isn't the greatest, especially for females. And now she's also going to have all the weight of knowing that she will be the heir to the throne, that she will have the responsibilities of the entire kingdom placed on her shoulder. And Viserys does explain very well that the Iron Throne is the most dangerous place in Westeros. The Iron Throne, we saw in Game of Thrones how bad it could be, and it's not safer or easier early on in their histories to be on the Iron Throne. And so that is, I think, a major plot to these stories is the reality of those dangers of ruling over the Iron Throne. You know, that and all the complexities that come for like people like the Hand of the King, the wives, like yeah. Okay, and the one other thing that I wanted to talk about in that same scene, the king also tells her about this dream that Aegon had. Now he tells her about the dream that brought them to Westeros. That one of their ancestors dreamed that the kingdom of Valyria was going to die. It was going to be destroyed, and they had to get away. And like 12 years later, Valyria was completely destroyed. So he told her about that. Then, once he had it set in his mind that he was going to make Rhaenyra the heir to the throne, then he also presented her with this other dream that Aegon had, that there will be this war in Westeros between the north and the south. And we're not talking about north and south of Westeros that he's ruling over, really. We're talking about north of the Wall. You know, and if we've watched Game of Thrones, we know about what's in the north of the Wall and how dangerous it is. And so he does tell her there is this real danger, because these dreams that their ancestors have tend to come true. They tend to be real. And so he knows that Aegon had this dream that the people or creatures, whatever you want to call them, from north of the Wall will end up fighting in this war with the people of Westerosi, and that they have to have somebody on the throne from the Targaryen family in order to be successful at all in that war. And that is our little bridge. That is our little bridge to Game of Thrones, because this is 200 years before Game of Thrones occurs. So I like that they're not making this Game of Thrones, but I do like that they put that little bridge in there so that we can have this, so that we can fill in the gaps a little bit between what happens then and what happens later on. Really cool. Okay. I'm going to end this soon. I just want to ask a couple questions of anyone who has any desire to put in their thoughts. Okay, so first question. When they say Dohaeris, honestly, I completely forgot this. I forgot like all that other language. And I'm pretty sure I did know what it meant at one time. But do you remember what Dohaeris means? I think it's Valor Dohaeris. What does that mean? Anybody? If you could tell me, leave it in the comments. If you can't, that's okay too. Okay, and then one of the things I'm thinking they will probably do, but I wonder what are your thoughts between this episode and next episode. Do you think there's going to be a time jump? I would like for them to spend a little bit more time in this point in history, but I do think they may very well do a big time jump. So what do you think? Do you think they'll do a big time jump from, I'm thinking from this point to when Rhaenyra is an adult and they're closer to getting to the point where Viserys is going to need somebody to take over. That's what I'm thinking. What do you think? That's all I have for you today for this first episode, the season premiere of House of the Dragon. I hope to see you next time when I do a reaction and discussion for season 1, episode 2 of House of the Dragon. See you then. Bye.